What do you make of the Brandin Cooks signing?
That's a good question. What is one to make of this sign? Well, I mean, first of all, let me get this straight. So a second-round pick goes one way when you really need your draft picks in a deep receivers draft, right? And so you just draft the receiver? So the upshot of moving DeAndre Hopkins is you get back David Johnson and his bag contract and Brandin Cooks, and now you're short some draft picks. I really wish I could say I know what's going on. From a football point of view, I can't make heads or tails of it. I think you just got worse on paper. I think even your ability to get better is compromised because in taking David Johnson's contract originally, and you have to connect these deals in your mind, you really didn't get draft pick compensation, and you didn't even get a first for DeAndre Hopkins. I don't care how outrageous they felt DeAndre Hopkins' contract ask was. Even if you thought that made him a distressed asset and other GMs were aware of this, you still cut a terrible deal for him and then kind of threw bad money after good to bring in another guy. Not that Cooks is bad. Cooks can be very good. But there are a bunch of receivers in the draft that can be very good that don't cost you anything other than the draft pick. So this is just, I don't think you can say it's anything other than bad GMing. And unless he's really relying on the ascendance of Deshaun Watson to carry him and paper over this, I don't know what he's doing.
This is not a hard thing for me to say. Bill OBrien needs to be fired as GM of the Houston Texans. I'm not saying he needs to be fired as coach, but he does not need to be running football operations for the Houston Texans. The man doesn't know what the hell he's doing. Either that or he allows his emotions to get in the way. He allowed that to be the case with Jadeveon Clowney. Laramie Tunsil has got more leverage than ever before because of Bill OBrien and his ways. You got the Buffalo Bills giving up so much more for Stephon Diggs than Bill OBrien got for DeAndre Hopkins. And now you get a guy in Brandin Cooks who's got a worse contract, has an injury-prone history. He's had like 5 concussions in 6 years that we know of. What the hell is the problem here? And then when you listen to Bill OBrien talk, he sits up there and hides behind the fact that guys want money. Oh, I'm sorry. DeAndre Hopkins, one of the top 3 or 4 receivers in all of football, arguably with the best hands in football, does not drop passes, who's on the receiving end of balls being thrown by one of the young stars in this business, in Deshaun Watson, who is a young star and on the rise and what have you, and you throw him to the wolves by getting rid of his best weapon, who's a Hall of Fame caliber weapon, and all you got to talk about, oh, well, you know what, the money, it wasn't that, when everybody and their mother knows you and DeAndre Hopkins were not on the same page. You did not get along. Well, guess what? DeAndre Hopkins was on the same page as Deshaun Watson. Deshaun Watson was on the same page as DeAndre Hopkins, but somehow, some way, Bill OBrien gets in the way of that. And forgive me, Booger, but correct me if I'm wrong. Wasn't there an issue with Bill OBrien and Rick Smith, the now former GM of the Houston Texans? Didn't they have some kind of issue, and somehow, some way, Bill OBrien ended up facilitating getting Rick Smith out of there? I mean, the guy has gotten rid of GMs. He's gotten rid of other employees. He's fired everybody but himself. You got rid of star players. You brought back bad contracts or whatever. I don't know what the hell else you need to do in order to prove that you ain't qualified for the damn job. Yes, he's had a winning record in 4 of the 6 seasons he's been there. He's been in the playoffs 4 times. I get all of that. But that doesn't mean he deserves to be the GM. This is a classic example of an individual that is in over his head, that has no business being in an executive position because he allows his emotions to get into the way of whatever business sense we believed he had, and he's going to waste the years of Deshaun Watson if you let him. Demote him, strip him of that executive title, restrict him to just being the coach, or get rid of him altogether. And if that doesn't work, then damn it, spare Deshaun Watson and trade him. That's what they should do.
You know, Stephen, I think you make a lot of good points, and Max does also. I think the bigger issue is that Bill OBrien has basically told us He wants to do it all. He wants to be the head coach and the GM. And although he has done a remarkable job as a head coach, going to the postseason as many times, even though he hadn't gotten deep into the playoffs, he's gone there several times. You got to give him a lot of credit for that. But he's been a disaster as a GM. But he's also told us he wants to do both. So if you're going to fire Bill OBrien, the GM, you may as well get rid of Bill OBrien, the head coach, because he doesn't want to work with anybody else. His actions have told us that he wants to do things his own way, a la Bill Belichick in New England. And I think the bigger issue here is caught up in all this is Deshaun Watson, arguably one of the better young quarterbacks in this league. He has to be sitting at home right now saying, I had a top 3 receiver in this league in DeAndre Hopkins. Now I have a guy in Brandin Cooks who has a concussion history. He drops footballs. And from a contract standpoint, we got rid of a guy that was making about $13 million a year. And Bill OBrien didn't want to give him a raise for a worse contract in Brandin Cooks. So if I'm Deshaun Watson, I'm sitting at home right now and I'm evaluating where I'm going for the next 5 years. They always talk about in business and in life, what's your 5-year plan? I would walk in Bill OBrien's office right now if I'm Deshaun Watson and say, hey, coach, GM, whatever you want me to call you, what's our 5-year plan? Because my job, and I want my career to go to a place where I can be a Hall of Fame caliber quarterback. I don't know right now if your planning and your team building is going to take me there. And so I think that's the bigger issue. Yeah, as a GM, we've all stated, he's been terrible. You don't get rid of DeAndre Hopkins and bring on Brandin Cooks and David Johnson. That's terrible. But the bigger issue is the position we're all trying to fill, the quarterback. He has one. What's your plan for your quarterback in Deshaun Watson? And right now, I think that is the biggest thing going on in Houston. After we get through beating up on Bill OBrien, and deservedly so for all the terrible moves that he's made, going back to Clowney, Hopkins, and now Brandin Cooks and David Johnson, Bill, what's your bigger picture for Deshaun Watson? Because if you don't have a picture for Deshaun Watson, you may as well trade him the hell out of there too and start over, because I think that's the key for this team going forward.
Thank you for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.